Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most infamous psychology experiments ever conducted, the Milgram experiment. This study didn't just shock its participants, it shocked the world. Let's break down exactly how it was done, what it revealed, and why it still matters today. Stanley Milgram, a psychologist at Yale University, wanted to understand how ordinary people could commit horrific acts under the direction of authority figures. To test this, he designed an experiment that simulated a learning task. Participants were told they were part of a study on memory and learning, but the real focus was on obedience. Participants were recruited through newspaper ads and paid $4.50, about $40 today, to take part. When they arrived, they were introduced to another participant, who was actually an actor working with Milgram. They drew slips of paper to determine their roles, teacher or learner. But the draw was rigged. The real participant was always the teacher. The learner was taken to a separate room and strapped into a chair with electrodes. The teacher was then shown a shock generator with 30 switches ranging from 15 volts, slight shock, to 450 volts, XXXX. The teacher was told to administer a shock every time the learner got a question wrong, increasing the voltage each time. Here's the twist. The shocks weren't real. The learner was an actor, and the screams were pre-recorded. But the teacher didn't know that. As the shocks increased, the learner would scream, beg to stop, and even go silent, making the teacher think they might have caused serious harm. If the teacher hesitated or wanted to stop, the experimenter, a man in a lab coat, would give a series of verbal prods. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Before the experiment, Milgram asked psychiatrists, students, and colleagues what they thought would happen. They predicted that less than 1% of people would go all the way to 450 volts, but the results were shocking. Literally. 65% of participants administered the highest voltage, even as the learner screamed in pain and begged them to stop. Milgram didn't just stop at one version of the experiment. He conducted over 20 variations to test different factors. Here are some key findings. Proximity of the learner. When the learner was in the same room as the teacher, obedience dropped to 40%. When the teacher had to physically place the learner's hand on a shock plate, obedience dropped to 30%. Proximity of the authority figure. When the experimenter gave instructions over the phone, obedience dropped to 20%. Legitimacy of the setting. When the experiment was moved from Yale University to a rundown office building, obedience dropped slightly but remained high at 48%. Presence of rebels. When two other teachers, actors, refused to continue, 90% of participants also refused. These weren't sadistic people. They were ordinary folks, teachers, engineers, even your next-door neighbor. Many showed clear signs of distress, sweating, trembling, and even laughing nervously. Some participants were so stressed that they had to stop the experiment early. Milgram himself was surprised by the level of obedience and the emotional toll it took on participants. The Milgram experiment sparked intense ethical debates. Critics argued that it caused significant psychological distress to participants and questioned whether the ends justified the means. Milgram defended his work, saying it revealed important truths about human nature. Today, the experiment would likely not be approved by ethics boards, but it remains a cornerstone of social psychology. The Milgram experiment has been used to explain real-world events, from the Holocaust to corporate scandals. It reminds us that blind obedience to authority can have devastating consequences. But it also shows that we have the power to resist if we choose to. For example, whistleblowers who expose corruption often defy authority to do what's right. So, what does this mean for us? It's easy to judge those participants and say, I would never do that. But the experiment shows that under the right circumstances, most of us might. It's a wake-up call to question authority, think critically, and stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. What do you think? Would you have gone all the way to 450 volts? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit